Did you know this animation cancel is actually the most optimal way to do damage on Ruby? I spent 2 hours wailing on dummies on stream, so you don't have to. I'll link my VOD in the comments down below if you all want to check out that session and confirm these numbers are true. And honestly, you should just check out my Twitch anyway, because I'm cool, but I digress. Now, enjoy this guide. We'll start by first talking about our basic skills, starting with the normal attack. So this normal attack is pretty simple and standard. It cleaves, it does good damage. Now, the biggest damage hit is backloaded, so if you're doing this, you probably want to do all of the hits. Right there, that last hit you can see did the most damage. And there's not really an animation cancel. Pretty simple stuff. Next up is this pyramid thing. Honestly, this thing seems pretty useless. Don't use it. Alright, next up is an actually good skill, the holding charge attack thing. This special beam cannon. So this thing does slightly more damage than the normal attack, but the benefit to this is, unlike the normal attack, which is more stationary, you can move this around. So against more mobile bosses, you can chase it around and hit it more easily. Now you have mobility while using this move, so unlike your normal attack, you are actually mobile, which can be a good benefit during bosses. It means you can attack while on the go. But the biggest downside is obviously that it consumes endurance, and it actually consumes endurance extremely fast. I run out of endurance within 5 seconds. Like so. So next up is our aerials. I already mentioned this one at the start of the video, how animation canceling this thing is your biggest damage. I'm going to explain a little bit how it actually works first though. So this thing actually has a super long animation where it goes for that entire time, right? It's almost double the duration if you do that whole thing. But what you can do is at the start of this first hit, the second the beam goes down, is you can cancel that with anything. So this doesn't just have to be a dodge attack, right? It can be a jump. Oh, I don't have my jump up. Whoops. It can be a jump. It can be a weapons skill or discharge weapon swap here. You can cancel it with your weapon skill. Like so. So there's a lot of ways to cancel this and a lot of ways to get a lot of damage out of this. The laser will stay even when you cancel it. It just stays on the ground and does damage the whole time. If you're far away, then it won't do as much damage. Sometimes the ticks won't hit fully. Let me see if I can demonstrate that really quick. So right there you can see I only got 4 hits, but when I was up close I got 5. If you're far enough away, it actually only does 1 hit. So there's a lot of caveats to the skill. Next up is her plunge attack. So this thing actually does pretty good damage. As you can see there, it's doing 23k as a non-crit, when my basic auto is doing 12k. So that's basically 2 basic autos. That's really good. The biggest downside of this is that you have to be really close to the boss in order to do it. Though it is pretty good damage if you can do it. Now that we've talked about her normal attacks, let's talk about her dodge attack, which is actually very unique. Her dodge attack is she throws out this bunny right here, and when it lands, as you can see there, it will suck in enemies that are nearby it. On top of this, it taunts those enemies for 1.5 seconds as long as you're not in group play. And I think if they're not a boss as well. So this is really good for being able to group up mobs and being able to cleave them down, especially as a cleave unit. You can do that, and then you can just go do combos and then get a bunch of damage off like that. This is good for killing mobs and stuff. It's a very strong skill actually, and pretty cool too. Now let's talk about our weapon skill. For some reason, we really wanted to cosplay League of Legends and make an 80 paragraph description for a singular skill. So I'm just going to give you a TLDR of what this thing does. Basically, it fires out a little cube and it'll bounce back and forth. When it hits an enemy, it gives them a debuff called Emblazon, and that lets your auto attacks do more damage, or normal attacks, or whatever they're called. Based on your advancements, this will do more. So at C0, it does 30% increased damage. At a C1, I think it's 80%, and then at C6, it's 160% because of power creep or something, I don't know. On top of this, it also gives you the passive that when you're hitting a target with burn on it, you will detonate that burn. Now, this doesn't get rid of the burn. What it does is it just means you deal damage based off how much damage that burn would deal over the rest of its life. So if that burn just hit and it will do a lot of damage, you'll do more damage then. But if it only has like 5 seconds left on its duration, then you're not going to do as much damage as, say, you would if it had 10 seconds. Now, this has a cooldown of 6 seconds, as you can see here. And then it has another passive on top of that because of why not. So when this hits, the actual cube hits an enemy, what it does is it gives you a stack of heat. And when you hit 8 stacks of this, you get 10% flame attack for 25 seconds, and it does a cool little stupid flame orb above your head. So we'll show you this in reality. As you can see, it fires the cube, and now that cube will bounce back and forth between me and the enemy. Sometimes that cube gets stuck if you don't hit it. It tries to bounce back to you, but sometimes it's really stupid. So like if I do that, it'll go over here, and then it'll just last for 15 seconds. and go hit it over here again. One thing to remember is that the further away you are when you hit the cube from the enemy, like the longer it travels, the more damage it will do. So when I'm super up close like this, it does 0 damage. You don't want to do that. That's a waste. But if you're over here, ideally, it'll do maximum damage. But this is pretty hard because it starts slowing down, and you have to remember that bosses will start moving and all that stuff. So as you can see, he's doing like 60k on crits. But if I move over here close, that just did 1.8k, which is literally nothing, which is why we don't want to stand over here. So there's a nice middle ground you have to find in order to understand whether or not it's going to hit based off bosses having mobility or you having to dodge skills and all that good stuff. One thing I forgot to mention is that for some reason, this thing likes to just phase through you if you're really close to it. So that's cool, I guess. Also, it bounces on walls, which is pretty funny. Also, your allies can actually make this bounce too. All right, next up is the discharge. There's not really much to say here other than this thing has a sick-ass animation, and it's pretty cool, and it does a lot of damage, and you want to use it as often as you can. And it also gives you damage immunity, which I didn't know until I read the description of the skill. Anyway, here it is. That thing is really cool. The only thing you should note is that if you're really close to a mob, I've been having issues with actually getting the damage off. So if you're like standing on top of them like this and use your discharge, if it's a smaller mob, sometimes I don't get like the last hit of it or whatever. So try to like space back a little bit and then use it. So we've talked about Ruby's skills and I have a decent understanding of them. Let's talk about how to build a team comp around Ruby so you can actually use her properly. Because Ruby is a main DPS, you want to find 2 units that will support her very well because she's going to be taking on most of the on-field presence. In my case, I'm using Tsubasa and King, and I'll explain that now. So obviously she has Flame Resonance, so that means you want another Flame character. This just gives you free attack. But then on top of this, as we mentioned her skills earlier, when you apply Burn, she's actually able to detonate that Burn for more damage just for free. It's part of her kit. So you actually want to have characters that can apply Burn. So in this case, Cobalt B would be the best example. If you have a C6 Cobalt B, that's ideal. But in my case, I don't because I'm free to play, by the way, or something. So I have A1 King, and this will suffice, kind of. So when I break a shield with a A1 King, I actually apply a burn to it, and then I can use that to detonate with Ruby. So this is kind of like Copium Cobalt B, I guess. So because Ruby is taking on most of the on-screen presence, so she's the main DPS, once again, you want a more supportive unit, and that's why we're taking Tsubasa on, personally. So we're taking her for 3 reasons. One, obviously, she's a support. She gives us damage. I can stack up her damage increase and then abuse that damage increase on Ruby. So that's nice. It's just a dodge attack. 2, if I want to use Ruby's discharge, I can use Tsubasa to easily build up that discharge and then go use Ruby's discharge if it's pretty close to that. So that's nice. And then 3, it's my highest star thing, so it's just free attack. So why wouldn't I do that? Now, as of current, I believe the best composition you can run with Ruby is Ruby plus Cobalt plus Claudia. But if you're coping like me and you're free to play, by the way, this is a decent alternative. Honestly, as long as you have a fire unit, even not having the burn, Ruby is still going to function very well. And as long as you're making sure you don't have someone else trying to compete for main DPS like a Samir or something, that's just wasting a slot. You could even slot in like a Nemesis over here for healing, for example. Like, as long as you're making sure Ruby's on screen most of the time, you're pretty much set to go. All right, we've talked about Ruby's skills and how they function. We talked about what characters pair well with Ruby. Now let's talk about how to actually play Ruby, what combos to use, all that stuff in a realistic setting. So here's some gameplay I recorded of myself doing Join Op 8, and I'm going to talk through some of the stuff I'm doing. So as you can see, I use Tsubasa in order to gain the damage buff and then swap over to Ruby's weapon so I can get the discharge. And then after I do that, I'm just doing the animation cancel combo I was talking about earlier, making sure I use the weapon skill so that way I get the Emblazon buff, which means more auto attack damage, all that stuff. Trying to keep up the Tsubasa damage buffs anytime I can, moving in to do that every 15 seconds or so when that's up. If possible, I try to also swap to Tsubasa in order to get the discharge for Ruby. So when I'm really close to that, I'll go for that. If the boss has its shield up and I have A1 King like I do, I try to break that shield with King, so that way I can get the burn on it and Ruby can go for procs with that. You can see I'm using all my discharges on Ruby, and then I'm going for animation cancels again. This boss is actually not moving too much because he seems to just be perma-CC'd and downed and whatnot. We're keeping him in a pretty confined area, honestly. But if he were moving more, you would see me using a lot more charge attacks. Like right here, I should probably be using charge attack where I'm walking towards him and doing the special beam cannon thing. That way I can keep up more uptime on him. And then right there, you can see some of the downside of using the aerial attack where it can whiff if the boss is moving. So make sure you keep in mind what the boss is doing, like what their attack pattern is, all this stuff. If they're moving constantly, then maybe you can't actually do this animation cancel. Maybe you have to do the normal attack thing. Maybe to do the special beam cannon thing. It just depends on the boss. But as you can see, he's stationary, so I can keep doing animation cancels. I can just keep pumping out damage as much as I can, swapping to Tsubasa, getting the damage buffs, making sure I use as many discharges as I can once again on Ruby. And yeah, that's my Ruby guide. If you want more gameplay for Ruby, check out my Twitch down in the description below. I'll be playing a lot of it. After all, I am a fire main. Like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. Only apparently 3% of my viewers are actually subscribed, so that's kind of messed up. Help change that. Help me exploit the algorithm, all that good stuff. Let me know if you want any other good content down in the comments below, what video ideas you have for me, and until next time, take care.